What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing strange fairy encounters. I came across literally hundreds of these. As you guys know, I am in the middle of finishing up the last edits for my book, Missing the Fae Theory by Gemma Jade, which I'm hoping will be out on Kindle in September and out on paperback by October, but I'll keep you guys posted. I also write the Missing in the Fae Theory videos for Missing Persons and Mysteries that Steve narrates. So if you haven't gone over to that channel and checked those out, which I know most of you have, please go on and do that. There's 3 up now. Steve is in the middle of narrating part 4, and I just a few minutes ago sent him part 5. But I wanted to get in on the fairy action for my channel, right? I found terrifying encounters, strange encounters, bizarre encounters. I mean, I am becoming a semi-professional expert on the Fae with all the research I've done for my book, for those videos, for this, and I just have so much more coming. There's just so much fairy research in me, I guess. I love the topic, and I decided to bring it on over to my channel. But let's get started, okay? When we think about monsters in the woods, or even just outside our homes in more suburban areas of the world, we usually think of cryptids like Bigfoot, or more recently, the translucent humanoid creature known as the Glimmerman. When going out for a hike or camping in the woods with our families, we may even worry about what many consider more real threats like snakes, ticks, or even bears. There aren't many people, though, I must admit. I am part of the minority on this one, as are many of you, I'm sure, after listening to Steve narrate my scripts on MP&M about fairies in the woods, who think about the Fae as one of the threats that are out there. While researching not only for those videos, but also for my book, which will be out soon and is titled The Missing the Fae Theory, I was shocked in the beginning to find that my visions of Tinkerbell and her beauty and mischievous behavior, which in my opinion made her even more cute as hell, were totally false. How is this even possible? I couldn't believe it as I sifted through encounter after encounter of people coming across all different types of fairies and being scared to death. Some of them even claimed to have been attacked or almost killed. Once I got even deeper into the research, I found that encounters like these were actually the normal for coming across fairies, regardless of the type or species, all across the world. The only exception are the brownies, and my research isn't anywhere near finished yet, so we don't even know about that. Here are just a few of the many fairy encounters I have come across that scared the crap out of me, or that I thought were really weird, and which honestly made me question my entire childhood. One of the most common species of fairy that people come across all over the world are the gnomes. Whether the garden variety or the evil ones who live in your home and torment you, gnomes are not to be messed with. Don't ever let your guard down once you know they're there, and don't make the mistake of letting everything you learned as a child confuse you or influence your decision when it comes to dealing with these nasty little beasties. They're ugly, horrible, and downright evil. They care nothing for the human race, and as far as they're concerned, we should be eliminated as a species in our entirety from this planet. I've come across many legends that claim we took dominion over the fairies when we were given it over the earth, and they were forced underground because of it. I tend to believe this is true, considering hundreds of years ago, centuries and centuries back, we had a beautiful and mutually beneficial relationship with the Fae. Mainly the indoor types like pixies and trolls and brownies, but these relationships were kept mainly with the peasants of society. The poorer souls of our species who were desperate and living near death every day were about to communicate and trade with the fairies. They were good at it. Now, I obviously can't say these things are fact, but what I can say is that I have done so much research that I'm confident in my semi-professional opinion that these accounts and legends are very real, and probably the reason so many species of Fae are out for blood when we used to be so close to them, almost like we were kin, like we were blood to them. Humans bulldozing down forests and turning their homes into shopping malls probably had a lot to do with their animosity towards us. I realize as well that the word gnome isn't some made-up nickname given to these fairies by some human trying to be funny or cute. The encounters literally consisted of little people wearing the same hat and boots and clothes that we all saw in our fairy tale books as little kids. Again, though, this is where the confusion always comes in. I'm going to show my age here, but do any of you remember the cartoon David the Gnome? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about here. A young kid we'll call Juan moved to Puerto Rico when he was 17 from the United States with his mom, Mary. When Juan had gone to take a shower in the new house, he immediately heard his dog going nuts and barking incessantly at something that seemed to be outside the window. It got to the point where Juan was concerned something was wrong with the dog or that there was something outside that was upsetting his pet, and he got out of the shower, wrapped himself in a towel, and went to see what all of the commotion was about. I'm sure what he saw was not what he was expecting to see. Like, not at all. Juan later described what he saw. Behind a tree outside in his yard, there was a figure that was lurking. He said there was a, quote, diminutive little man, end of quote, dressed all in white. It had a cone-shaped hat and pointed shoes and reminded him of his mother's garden gnome she kept all over the place, only this one was in all white and quite obviously it was living and breathing. It was sinister in nature and appeared to have a kind of evil look on its face, like it knew exactly what it was doing by showing itself to the dog. It wanted to scare the pet. Somehow Juan said he just knew this intuitively, that this thing wanted to scare his dog. The little man creature gave a sinister smile and a nod of his head and disappeared into thin air. Juan was confused and scared himself. I just want to point out here that having fairy totems of any kind anywhere in or near your home is not a very good idea. Garden gnomes, fairy statues, or the more recent trend of fairy gardens, and even elf on a shelf are all totems that can actually bring the fae to you, and the fae are not friendly. This is not something you want to mess with. As I reiterate, they are not friendly and sparkly and could actually take you to their realm and enslave you for the rest of time. There would be no death as we know it. So anyways, back to Juan. He said he couldn't believe his eyes, but managed to calm his dog down enough so that he could finish his shower. He tried in the next few days to rationalize the experience. Maybe he was tired from the move or homesick, missing the states where he was originally from and had lived and loved his whole life. This was hard to do, however, I mean, the rationalizing, because the dog saw it too, and it was quite obviously there. A few days later, Juan was in the same yard he had a few days previously seen the gnome man thing. He said suddenly and seemingly out of nowhere, it appeared to him again, and Juan wanted to communicate with it this time, so he simply asked out loud what its name was. Almost unbelievably, it answered him right away. The gnome answered, quote, Sebastian Polazar, end of quote. The little man, or Sebastian, then disappeared again right back into thin air as it had a few days before. At this point, Juan thought he was going crazy, and so he finally decided to tell his mother. Now, I found out very quickly that when you know the name of a fairy or any other supernatural or paranormal entity or being, you have some power over it. I'm not sure why Sebastian gave this power to Juan, but allegedly he did. And so when Mary told Juan he must be nuts and that she was sure he was pulling her leg, he had always hated her garden gnomes in the first place. Juan decided to call out the gnome's name, and just like that again, Sebastian the gnome appeared, this time in front of not only Juan, but his mother Mary as well. Then, just as quickly as he was there, he was gone. The entire time Juan and his mother lived in the house, the little trickster would appear and disappear just as fast. It happened all the time and scared the crap out of the dog every time it happened. The gnome seemed to enjoy the family and their pets' fear and would constantly cause a ruckus every time he just blinked himself into our realm and showed himself to them. He would get such enjoyment out of seeing the family panic or scream when he would just pop in. Eventually, the family moved out of the house because of all the visits from Sebastian. The dog was never the same and was jumpy and paranoid for the rest of the poor thing's life, which I'm very sure was the gnome's intent right from the start, to drive the family insane and feed off of that energy. This story is unique in that the little person actually shared its name. It wasn't an alias, because if it were, he wouldn't have had to appear on demand. Unless it was playing some kind of game, you never know. This is how it goes with fairies and humans. There are blood pacts that were sealed in the ancient times. I talk about this in my book. While we still don't know about what these rules are because we haven't been taught them because they were sealed in blood, some of us instinctively know the rules and try our best to play by them. Never give any fairy your real name for any reason. The power it will have over you is something you do not ever want to experience. People reporting encounters with fairies dates back, as I've mentioned, since the beginning of time, since the written word especially. There is an account I came across from 1757 about a British cleric named Edward Williams, which is especially creepy and unsettling. William claimed he had been playing with some of the children from a neighboring village when all of a sudden they saw something quite bizarre and unusual to them. There was suddenly, out of the clear blue sky, as if they had appeared out of nowhere, a procession of 8 couples of little people. They were holding hands, marching 2 at a time, and dressed all in red. They were mere inches in height, each one of them. Each one was also carrying a miniature white handkerchief in its hand. According to Williams' report, one of the strange tiny men suddenly realized they were being watched and got very aggressive. He proceeded to break out of his line and started chasing the children around a field. As I mentioned many times in both the videos for MPNM and also in my book, you should never ever look upon any kind of fairy without permission. I know in this case it was completely by accident that the children had seen this strange fairy procession, but still, fairies hate us and don't care about accidents. It's in the pacts we're not allowed to look upon them without their permission. So it was reported, not just by Edward, but by all of the children who were present that day and ended up chased and terrorized by this tiny person, that the creatures came into full view and they had an ancient, swarthy, and grim complexion. As the children ran for what they somehow instinctively knew was their lives, they said that suddenly all of the little people were chasing them around this field and then through these woods and were cursing at them and screaming, but the language was unintelligible. It was something they never heard before. I wonder how the kids knew they were being cursed at if the language was unintelligible, but I digress. Edward never forgot this incident, and though he never encountered anything like this ever again, until the day he died, he pondered and stressed over the incident obsessively. He said, quote, "I am forced to class it among my unknowables," end of quote. I love the way they talked back then. I really do. Forced to class it among my unknowables. La-di-da. In 1911, there was a book published by Walter Yealing Evans Wentz called The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries. In this book, the author interviews a man named Neil Colton, who was 73 at the time of the interview, and claimed that while he was a boy in 1853, he had extremely bizarre and seriously terrifying encounter with a fairy. Neil said that one beautiful spring day, he, his brother, and his cousins decided to go and pick some berries in the countryside surrounding his house. Berry picking, right? Just another aside here. You guys know what I'm going to say, right? We all know, if you've been following my fairy encounters or my live book readings of excerpts I've done on Campfire Stories a few months back, or even in general, that this picking berries anywhere out in nature is a very bad idea, as these belong to the fairies. If berries are growing outside, especially in a woodland area, and they are edible to humans, please believe and know and trust that they are there because of the fae. The fae use them to lure us to them when they need to, but also this is where they spend their time under the moon, mating, dancing, and practicing their ancient magic. It's a known fact in this community that people who go berry picking, especially young kids, are much more likely to suddenly disappear and end up missing for a few days with an incredible story to tell, deceased by some unnatural and unexplainable thing, or just gone forever because they've been brought to one of the fairy realms to serve whatever purpose the particular fairy who committed the abduction needed them for. So right off the bat, bad idea, Neil. Neil says they suddenly heard some music coming through the trees from seemingly nowhere, and they decided to investigate and find out where the beautiful notes were coming from. Somewhat expectedly, at least to me when I read this encounter, the group came across a bunch of fairies dancing in the clearing of the woods. As they watched, one of the females in this fairy group, who was dressed in all red, sensed that they were being looked upon, which I reiterate you mustn't do without express permission of the fairy in question, and she ran towards them, very aggressively and wielding a stick of some sort. She smacked Neil's cousin on the cheek with it, and the girl almost fell and happened to grab Neil's brother's arm to support herself. Before we go any further, I'll mention that in my book and in the Missing in the Fae videos on MPNM, I spoke about how if a fairy dressed all in red smacks you anywhere about the body or in the face, you could die or at least become very sick. I think what I said though was, you will surely die. Well, Neil's cousin collapsed as the group was running away from this little woman. She gave chase for a few minutes, but then decided to turn back. Everyone thought the young girl who had collapsed was in fact dead, and so they went and got the local priest, who decided to pray over her body immediately upon seeing her. She did wake up, but very slowly, and she was extremely disoriented and groggy. It was determined by the priest that the young girl would have surely died had she not grabbed her cousin's arm. So had she fallen like right away, it was like a death slap. Death by being struck by a fairy all in red isn't death like how we think of it. It's simply a moving of one's soul from this realm to one of the fae realms. Soul enslavement. You're not still thinking of Tinkerbell when you think of the fae, are you? Fairies have been blamed for centuries for the kidnapping of young children, especially infants. The reason for this is simple. Changelings. Sometimes the fae, like humans, have a child who is unhealthy and for whatever reason they know isn't going to survive very long. In this case, they are known to go and kidnap a human baby and replace it with the changeling child. Because the child is a changeling, it will look almost exactly like the child it is meant to replace, but obviously there will be something wrong with and or about it. Many times the parents will never see the child again, but every once in a while the child will randomly be returned, and every single time this has been documented to have happened throughout history, the child has been returned and was now some kind of prodigy, usually in musical arts or having some talent for drawing and or painting. Nobody knows why the children are returned at all, let alone with such extraordinary gifts. But sometimes they just are. More often than not, however, they're gone forever, raised in the fairy realm as a fairy. There was a woman in 1844 who had a newborn baby of her own. She and her husband were very pleased with the child, and the mother one day was laying to nap with the baby in her bed. It seems she awoke just in time though, because there she saw at the foot of her bed about 6 or 7 sandy-skinned tiny fairies undressing her newborn baby. They saw the mother had awoken and was watching them, and they took off and flew away right through a hole in the floor. They were laughing and giggling mischievously the entire time. Luckily, they left the child behind, and the mother said that she always slept with the infant from that day on, either in between her and her husband or with the child in her arms tightly. Imagine how terrifying that would be, knowing fairies literally almost kidnapped your child, like you were watching it happen. How lucky was she that she woke up? She would pin the baby's bedclothes to the pillow or the bed as well. That way, if anything came in and tried to snatch the baby up and make a quick escape, they wouldn't be able to, and she felt she would surely wake up feeling the baby trying to be grabbed along with the pillow. Eventually, the legend goes, this house was torn down and the family with the little baby moved. Another family moved into the new home built on the same property, and they had a small child, one who could only crawl at the time. Unfortunately, this mother wasn't as lucky as the one before her, and she actually did have her child taken by the Fae with a changeling left in its place. However, the mother, being familiar as she was with the tales and legends of the Fae, knew she would never see her child again and decided to love and care for the little changeling as if it were her own child. From that day on, she would wake every morning to find money and gold coins in her pockets and change purse. While these tales weren't all that terrifying on the surface, they are if you really think about it. Kidnapping, being almost murdered with your soul enslaved, and having your dog tormented day in and day out is extremely scary, at least in my opinion. If nothing else, these tales are so incredibly mundane and bizarre, and that to me is what makes them that much more believable. Guys, that's all I have for you today. I am working on scary fairy encounters, terrifying fairy encounters, urban fairy encounters. I have this whole thing that I put in the Missing in the Fae 5 about fairies in Detroit specifically, from like before colonization of Detroit through now. It's crazy. I put a little bit in the Missing in the Fae 5, but I'm going to cover it here. If you haven't already, check out my Missing in the Fae series over on Missing Persons and Mysteries, narrated by the amazing Steve Stockton, the other part of Stemma, Steve, Gemma, Stemma, me and Steve, my partner in true crime. I love you. I'll keep you all updated about my book, which should be coming out on Kindle in September and paperback in October. Hopefully, it's all about the Missing in the Fae. If you enjoyed this video and like spending this time with me, please be sure and give this video a big thumbs up. I really appreciate when you guys do that. My views are super high and my likes are never even near as high as my views. And that's like, what did I do? Or I think actually people are liking it and a lot of the likes get taken by YouTube. So anyway, give this video a big thumbs up. I would really, really appreciate it. Also, spread the love by sharing this video. I'll see you guys in the comments. Let me know what you think. I am getting all of your emails, encounter stories, and just random emails saying what's up. I didn't have time to even go through them last week, but I'm hoping to film listener encounters 8 and 9 today, like right now, if I can find the time, because I have stream tonight as well. In the description box, you'll find links for all 3 of my live streams that I do weekly with Steve Stockton. The ones on Missing Persons and Mysteries are Friday night Campfire Tales and Sunday night Fireside Chats. And right here on Gemma Jade on Wednesday nights, I do live oracle readings with Steve Stockton. We pull a card for each person in the chat who wants one. More information on those in the description box. Also, links if you want to make a donation to the channel through PayPal or become a patron. To all of my patrons, thank you so, so much. To everyone who not only donates money, but who supports me emotionally, who supports all of my endeavors, backs me up, watches all of my videos, regardless if they're interested in the topic or not, and always has a kind word to say. I really appreciate you guys more than you even know. I tell you all the time, and I definitely mean it. So guys, that's all I've got. I will see you guys next time in the next video. If you have any encounters with the supernatural and or paranormal and want me to put them in a future episode of Listener Encounters, please email them to me at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. And sometimes it does take me weeks to get to my emails. I can go 2-3 weeks without checking them because I just don't have the time, but I do my best. So bear with me, be patient. I am never ignoring anyone's texts. I am never ignoring anyone's emails. Every second of my day is spent doing something. So bear with me. It's not always going to be like this. Also, my setup, I'm getting a new office, and now I'm rambling. All right, so I love you guys, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.